let's welcome Dr. Candice Markle for the session on evaluation types, methods, and approaches. Welcome, Candice.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I'm so thrilled to be part of this. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you today. And we are going to shift gears slightly and move to a very easy topic of evaluation types, approaches, and methods. Easy, right? No, I'm lying to you. It's not very easy at all. And even very seasoned evaluators I spoke to when I was preparing for this, I asked, what's your take on, this distinction between these concepts? And even very seasoned evaluators were saying that I'm really puzzled by this sometimes. And hopefully today, as we discuss, the distinction between these terms, you'll have a sense of what this gray area is between them, but then also as we move towards the end of the session, have a better sense of how to distinguish between them and how to make the choices in choosing an evaluation type, approach, and method, whether you're an evaluator or a commissioner or somebody who uses evidence. So we'll first step into defining concepts. Then we'll go into, some kind of typology of evaluation approaches. How are they clustered into these different approaches, types, and methods? And then we'll go into some principles underpinning choosing an evaluation type, method, and approach that might help all of us in distinguishing between these and using the best fit for an evaluation. What we will do is to pause throughout for Q&A throughout the session. Because I can talk a lot. So I just wanted to put that up front. So hopefully it will be better if I pause every couple of slides to give you an opportunity to participate as well. So I really hope we can have a conversation today. I think I forgot to mention where I'm from. So in case you wanted to know what my day job is, I'm the director of the Center for Learning on Evaluation and Results, Anglophone Africa. We are one of 6 global centers, and we are an implementing partner of what is called the Global Evaluation Initiative. And our main remit or our main mandate is to strengthen national evaluation systems. So first of all, a question to yourselves, and this can be a complete guess if you don't know the answer. How many evaluation types and or approaches do you think there are? You can put it in the chat, you can unmute and shout out if you'd like. Let's see what comes up. So please take a guess if you don't know, or if you do know exact numbers, please do tell us. How many evaluation types and approaches do you think there are? 3. We've got 3, okay, utilization focused, result based. That's what Ritu says. 4 types, Brian, thank you. Who else? Take a guess. 3 types. Okay. So we're getting some of the lower numbers. Process evaluation. Yeah. Realist, developmental, summative, formative, etc. 10. Okay, we're getting higher numbers now. Summative, impact. I heard about 110. Wow, Ruba. 17. Okay, interesting. So, in fact, if you do any kind of cursory type of investigation on your trusty old Google, you'll find that there is really very little consensus on this. So if you look at, and some of you mentioned some of these types and approaches already, and if you go to, one of our best go-tos right now in the sector is the website called Better Evaluation. Well, I should say, for those who are in my circle, we often go to Better Evaluation. Now, I went to Better Evaluation. I found just roughly about 25 approaches. But then if you look at other websites, then some of you said 3, 4. You're quite correct as well. Some will say there are 3 or 4 basic types. So those that are the basic ones that, will come up are the formative and the summative. And then you have your process evaluation, your implementation evaluation. So I think the point that I want to bring across is that there really is very little consensus. There isn't an industry standard where you can get a table that will list very neatly and very clearly that these are the main evaluation types and these are the evaluation approaches. In fact, if you look at some of the guides that are out there by various development partners, even in a guide that says these are specific evaluation types, even within the text itself in the guideline, they will use those terms interchangeably. So even though the heading might say, this is an evaluation type, in the text, it will say, this evaluation approach uses XYZ methods. So in the sector as a whole, I think one of the confusing factors, especially for those who are entering into the field new, if you're a young and emerging evaluator, this might be really, really confusing. However, there are some principles that we can use to distinguish between some of these, and we'll be going through those later, as I mentioned. And there are some kind of agreements around broad areas of how to cluster them, and we'll be going through those as well. So, first of all, evaluation approaches. What is being said out there about evaluation approaches? So first of all, if you look at Trust or Better evaluation, it's referred to as an integrated package of options, that is methods or processes. So methods, which we will deal with a little bit later, methods are generally referring to how we collect data or how we analyze data very, very broadly. So according to Better evaluation, an evaluation approach is an integrated package of those methods or processes. Then my colleague Reinhard Stockmann, who teaches at IPDET, talks about evaluation approaches being the individual work steps that tells you how to proceed in an evaluation. And they also indicate the methodological tools to be used. So actually very similar to Better evaluation, talking to the process, which is those work steps or how to proceed step by step, and the methodological tools, meaning, some of the methods and some of the design elements that will be in an evaluation. And then thirdly, Jos Wassen, who is an absolute expert in methods, a methods expert with the World Bank and the Global Evaluation Initiative, together with colleagues Lemaya and Bafani in 2020 did a very, very excellent guideline on evaluation methods. And they say that for simplification purposes, they define methods as a particular technique involving a set of principles to collect or analyze data or both. So as I said previously, methods being mainly how you collect data and analyze them. Then they go on to say that an approach is situated at a more aggregate level and involves a combination of methods. So the bottom line is that an approach is kind of an umbrella term that holds all of your processes and your methods to an evaluation. So at least we have some kind of idea of what the term approach means. So examples of approaches would be a case study approach, developmental evaluation. Some of you mentioned some of this in the chat box. You have utilization-focused evaluation, randomized controlled trials, realist evaluation, etc., etc. Now, there isn't enough time in this hour to go through each of these individual approaches, and these, together with many, many others, as I said, about 25 or more on the Better evaluation website, has a beautiful description of exactly what each of these approaches means, how to go about them, and then also some additional resources that you can dig deeper into to go into understanding how these approaches actually manifest in an evaluation, how you can use them in an evaluation. Now, the puzzling question that I want to put out to all of you. What is the difference between an approach and a type? I'd love you to talk to me, so please talk back to me. You can put it in the chat, but it'd be great if a couple of you could just give your best definition or distinction between and approach and the type. And remember, I did say to you, even very seasoned evaluators are puzzled by this. So please don't feel like you're going to be making a mistake if you give your opinion. So please go ahead. Okay, like K, 1B says that type is prospective, formative, and summative, and approaches talk to methods. Lekay, if you could, it would be great if you could unmute and just describe that to us. There might be some people who've never heard of this distinction before. It'd be great if you could just walk us through it.
Thank you, Candice. So I think when it comes to the types, broadly, the three types are being defined, at least in some of the program, as you mentioned, the IPDET, the types of the evaluations are considered as prospective, formative, and summative. Prospective usually being done before the projects are being formulated or in the process of formulations, and the formatives are in the process, that is all the during the process of implementation of the project, the midterm reviews, the mid assessments are all those formative, and summative are basically the end and the terminal evaluation that we conduct. So these are the broadly three types. But when it comes to the approaches, as you said, it is a method. It is about collecting, starting from the collecting of data up to the analysis and presentation of that data is different approaches. So we have in the better evaluations, we have more than 25 plus. So I feel that that type is all about the stages of the evaluations. And then when it comes to the approaches, it's about the methods, steps, and the process of analysis. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think that your fellow participants are agreeing with you. Dubi is saying same type of evaluation can be done through different approaches. And then Petra is saying a type refers to when in the project cycle the evaluation takes place. And that's similar to what you were saying, Lekay, is that a type could be, you know, formative being while the intervention is still taking place, summative being at the end of the evaluation, ex ante is before the intervention takes place. And so you can have a different approach in each of those types of evaluations. I think there is broad agreement, or at least some agreement amongst us in the room, that we can make that distinction between a type being allocated to where in the project or program cycle you are. And that is when you'll have those kind of 3 or 4 types that people talk about: formative, summative, implementation, process, impact, and so forth. And then the approach being that integrated package of methods and processes. Remember that if you are not speak, please mute yourself, and that will be really great for the rest of us. Okay, so I think that we've basically agreed, I think, generally, about that distinction between type and approach. Although I must give one caveat that often when you read some of the literature around this or how people are writing about it in grey literature, there's often a conflation between the two terms. So somebody would say a randomized control trial is a type of evaluation. And that kind of goes against what we've been saying. But I think the broad understanding is the type is, you know, according to where in the project or program cycle. So don't be surprised if you do see differences happening when you're doing some of the readings. So to give an example of the different types of evaluations related to questions around the outcome model. So I've heard that you've done a theory of change, and you must have done some work around logic modeling or the logical framework. So you would be familiar with this logical chain of inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And the National Evaluation Policy Framework of the Department of Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation in South Africa has actually in their guide, they've got a specific guide for evaluations for the National Evaluation System that has distinguished between 6 different types of evaluations related specifically for questions around the outcome model. So just to take you through some of these, or what these specific types are. First of all, and this is specifically related to the National Evaluation Policy Framework for South Africa. So even though some of these are generic, this is the specific guideline. Like I said earlier on, there is no industry standard that says this is exactly how evaluations should be done. And so you'll find that various institutions, different countries, different organizations will generally have their own guideline in terms of how they distinguish between these. So first of all, in terms of the design element of designing policies, designing programs, a diagnostic evaluation can be done. And this refers to what is the root cause of the problem? What is the underlying situation? And so they've defined diagnostic evaluations as being some of that element of root cause analysis and evaluating or analyzing. And this is normally before a program is defined or an intervention is designed, that a diagnostic evaluation can be done. Then secondly, a design evaluation. So like you said, you did some work on theory of change, I think yesterday. And so you can also have an evaluation type that is a design evaluation. And the design evaluation specifically looks at the theory of change and the fidelity of the theory of change. So does the theory of change seem strong? Is there at face value, a relationship between the elements of the outcome model, between the elements of the theory of change, between the logical flow of the development pathway? So is there a likelihood that the inputs, the combination of inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes would lead to those changes, those outcome changes, those impact changes? So a design evaluation specifically looks at the fidelity of the theory of change. An implementation evaluation is often the most easy to understand and is often the fallback or the one that gets done the most, because it's easiest to track and to assess what is happening. Is the program being implemented the way it was intended? Are the intervention milestones being achieved? Is the money being spent the way it has been intended to be spent? And so the implementation evaluation looks at how the program is being implemented. An outcome evaluation starts to look at those changes that an intervention is meant to effect. So an outcome evaluation asks whether the intervention has had any kind of impact. And here we're using the word impact very judiciously or very reservedly. But an outcome evaluation looks at whether any of the changes that were intended are being achieved. And then similarly, the impact evaluation will then have a longer range view of whether that intervention has had the longer term, longer range changes and benefits that that particular policy or program was meant to accrue. Economic evaluations are also a type of evaluation in this particular system. And so generally done through cost-benefit analyses. So the economic evaluation asks, what are the costs in relation to the benefits of this particular policy or this program or this portfolio of projects? So those are generally the types of evaluation that are assigned to the National Evaluation Policy Framework of the South African Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. And so if you think of what we just spoke about, the typology of types of evaluations according to where you are in the project cycle or program cycle, you can see somewhat of a relationship between that and this. But just to note that once again, because there isn't an industry standard of this is what we call a type of evaluation, you will see that the term formative and summative hasn't been used in this particular typology. And I thought I would just point that out as well. Lastly, an evaluation synthesis. I forgot to mention that one. So the evaluation synthesis is very, very useful, especially if you think about, and I heard Megan talk about the COVID-19 consortium that they are currently coordinating. So in the context of the need for rapid evidence, and evaluation synthesis is often very useful when there isn't time to collect empirical data. And we know, for example, that there are many evaluations that have already been done on a particular subject matter. So if you think about something such as conditional cash transfers, and so if there is a policy shift or a policy development in the area of social protection and conditional cash transfers, it might not be necessary to do empirical research or evaluations. One might be able to get some information from existing evaluations, and that is when evaluation syntheses are very, very useful. So there's a question from Leon Shoki. Is evaluation synthesis similar to meta-evaluation? I'm going to give you my answer, but then I'd like others to also perhaps come in. Please feel free to put it in the chat or to unmute or to raise your hand. But I would say there is a difference between an evaluation synthesis and a meta-evaluation. A meta-evaluation would generally be done on a single evaluation, and it's about assessing the quality generally it's about the quality or what came out of a particular evaluation. So it's an evaluation of an evaluation, whereas an evaluation synthesis is actually trying to derive evidence out of a range of evaluations because there is a need for evidence to take a particular decision. From a meta-evaluation, you're not necessarily wanting to take a policy decision. You are most likely wanting to see whether the veracity of that particular evaluation. And yes, certainly you can do a meta-evaluation on a number of evaluations, but the objective is different. An evaluation synthesis is to derive evidence in order to take a particular decision. So I would say that there is certainly a distinction between the two. And then, of course, in the NEPF, there is a guideline for all of these. And if you are interested in looking at how these types of evaluations have been defined, you can very easily get it on the DPME website, which is, if you Google it, once again, I trust you, Google, if you Google DPME South Africa, you should be able to get to the website very easily. Let me pause at this point. Are there any questions? Are there any comments you'd like to make? I'll check the chat box. So, Adika, you are saying types of evaluation match the program development level and program activity. Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. I think that aligns with what we were saying, is that depending on where you are in the program cycle or in the project cycle, that will most definitely give you an idea of what type of evaluation would be the best fit. And we have another comment or another question. Do value for money evaluations fall under the economic evaluation category? That's from Maha. I would say yes. Value for money generally talks about, also generally about the costs, benefits, and what governments talk about. Is it buying what it intends to buy or bang for your buck? So in the investment in, for example, health services or any other public goods, is the value actually being derived for the investment that's being made? So it would certainly fall under the economic evaluation category. Okay, any other questions? I am not seeing hands. So if I'm not seeing your hand and I'm ignoring you, please just unmute and go for it. Otherwise, I can actually continue taking the chat box. I'll pause for a moment. I don't see any hands. I see the chat coming up. Hillman is saying post-harvest survey economic analysis falls under economic evaluation. I'd like to ask you a question back on that one, Salman. So what would the objective of that particular economic analysis be? And then it might tell us where that would fall. So could you share with us? Salman? see how intervention has improved the production. Okay. So this is an important point. An objective of the evaluation is about the effect it's had, right? So from what I'm reading, it's about, has any change happened in production? Has production improved? So, I mean, I would throw this out to yourselves as well, how you would think of that. But if it's not an economic evaluation, where would you place that? If it's about the result, so I would say no, that's not an economic evaluation. Let me give you a clue. It's about the outcome or the result that you see. That's your big question. What kind of outcome or what kind of impact do you think you'd see out of that intervention? So giving you that clue around outcome or impact, that would fit into the realm of either outcome or impact evaluation. So the moment your objective is about seeing whether something has changed for beneficiaries, it sits in the realm of outcome or impact evaluation. Okay, we're getting such interesting questions. Would we mix several evaluation types? I'm going to park that question because I have a slide about that later on. Brilliant question. And then you're asking as a follow-up, if so, would evaluation questions set for each type separately? Wow, that's very technical. Okay, let's try to answer both of those later when I get to that slide. And do remind me if I don't touch on the second part of the question, but certainly we are going to answer the question about, can you mix several evaluation types? Then we've got Maha asking, can we use the term process evaluation interchangeably with implementation evaluation? That's a fantastic question. I've been critiqued before for calling implementation evaluation a process evaluation. Personally, professionally, my sense is that it is the same thing, but there are some colleagues who feel that the two are different. I can't remember what the argument was for the difference. If anybody in the room has been criticized for calling a process evaluation also an implementation evaluation, please do let us know. Raise your hand, put it in the chat. But I know there are some who do feel that these two are different. In evaluations that I've done, I've struggled to distinguish between process and implementation, but hey, we all learn all the time. Maybe some of you who are seasoned evaluators can let us know if you feel that there is a difference between the two. Many questions coming through. Okay, I'm going to take a break to just move quickly to some more content and then come back to the questions so that we don't lose the opportunity to learn just slightly more in terms of this kind of topologies and how do we cluster these things. And I will come back to some of these questions. So the interesting question that came up was, can you combine different evaluation types? In fact, here is what I'm saying is that you can actually combine a type with an approach. So a little bit of a different angle to what your question was, right? But let's deal with both. So first of all, an evaluation type, which we've already said is located along the program or policy or project cycle, can use different approaches. So for example, if you have an implementation evaluation, you can use a participatory approach. Similarly, if you have an impact evaluation, which is a type of evaluation, you could use an experimental design or a quasi-experimental design or a non-experimental design or approach. And an evaluation synthesis, which is a type, which we've just looked at in the NEPF, can use a rapid approach. So first of all, you can combine types with various approaches. And I think some of you mentioned that in the chat box already. The second question is, can you combine different types? That one is a little bit more tricky if you're going to be going according to the thinking of where are you in the project cycle. So if you are at the end of the project or program or policy, it's the end of implementation and what we would call then summative, it would be very difficult to combine the summative with the diagnostic, right? Because your objective is very different and your placement of where you are in the cycle of the program or the policy is very different. So in that case, no, you can't combine those types. There might be, though, a combination of something like an evaluation synthesis that can be used at the beginning of an intervention. So before an intervention is even off the ground, when there is still a decision to make around which policy choice we have to make. So let's say we use the example of conditional cash transfers. I think a number of countries in the midst of COVID were thinking about social protection, and we're thinking about different ways in which to ensure that they address the extreme poverty that was arising because of the impact of COVID. And so social protection and cash transfers was something that many countries were thinking about doing. Certainly South Africa was one of those. So in the beginning of an intervention, before a policy choice is even made, you actually can do an evaluation synthesis, which is seen as an evaluation type, and it's actually done at the beginning, which is an ex-ante evaluation. It's before the implementation of an intervention. So in certain cases, the answer to your question, yes, you can combine different evaluation types, but it must be done very carefully, and according to there must be a very clear reason why the combination is being used, because there's also the danger of combining too many elements. This is the other thing that I meant to say, is that it's a growing list. So because evaluation is a multidisciplinary field, you'll find that people are coming from various disciplines all the time into evaluation teams, and they're combining various approaches, very new innovative approaches with some of your more traditional types and approaches, and coming up with very new innovative designs. So even when you go and try to define, what is your final list of approaches or types, you'll find that the list just keeps growing, because there's something that certainly I am discovering all the time, that, that particular approach I've never heard of before, but suddenly it's being brought in from another discipline. And because evaluation is multidisciplinary, you'll find that various approaches are kind of creeping into this topology of types and approaches. So there's so much to choose from. I think what's really, really important, which we will get to today, is to make sure that your purpose and your rationale for the use of a particular type and a particular set of approaches and methods really is meaningful in terms of the question, the big question that you do want to answer. Let's see, I saw another question coming up. Ooh, this interesting one. How many years should an impact evaluation be implemented once a government project ends? It is also dependent on the number of years of project implementation. Okay, so let's think about this one. Impact evaluation is seen in two ways in our sector. The one is where it is seen as being defined very theoretically, and it's mostly, I would say, by economists do these kind of evaluations very, very well, and you get methodological experts who do this very, very well, and organizations who specialize in this. So you might be familiar with 3IE, who specialize in impact evaluations of a certain type, which is experimental and quasi-experimental designs. That kind of evaluation has very little to do with timing, and it has everything to do with whether there is enough evidence to prove that a particular intervention had a very distinctive and particular effect on the beneficiaries it's targeting. So whether it's a 6-month intervention or a year-long intervention or a 5-year intervention, if you design that evaluation specifically for impact, as in you've got a control group and you've got an intervention group, and you are able to test whether there's any change between those groups because of the intervention itself, then that is called an impact evaluation. Working in the policy world, though, and I also come from the public sector. Before I worked for CLEAR, I worked for very many years in a government department that was responsible for evaluation and reported to policymakers on evaluation. And what I found was that the question from policymakers is always about impact. They don't want to hear our long stories about the definitions are different and you can't use the impact because you don't have a control group. Our policymakers want to know, is this policy making an impact, or are these programs, our investment in these programs or these policy choices making an impact? And that definition of impact is the one that I would say is most commonly used or very commonly used. And that has to do with how long does it take to see that change happen? So if you look at something like a school feeding program, and a school feeding program that is meant to ensure that learners from a very poor socioeconomic environment are attending school and that they're not being kept at home because there is no food, and you're wanting to see that change happening in learner enrollment numbers. How long does it take for that intervention to have that kind of change happening? And then even that kind of change is not necessarily seen as impact. For learners to be attending school more regularly is still at an outcome level. It's kind of, that's a change that you're seeing at the outcome level. Learners are attending school, but the impact that policymakers are wanting to see is that our literacy levels being improved because of our school feeding programs. Now, that kind of impact is a lot more complex to evaluate. And it's not, if you can think about it just logically, a school feeding program is not the only thing that impacts on literacy levels. There might be a combination of interventions, of public interventions by not only the state, but by non-state actors as well. There might be religious groups, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, development partners, foundations, donors, and government working together towards improving literacy. So actually, evaluating the impact of a government school feeding program on literacy levels becomes really complex, and there is no such thing as saying how many years is the ideal time to evaluate. What normally happens is that it's done according to the time frame of the program. So a program can run for 5 years, and normally you'll find that the funder says at the end of the 5 years, they want an impact evaluation. So there isn't, once again, an industry standard to say that impact can be measured after 3 years. You will find in some guidelines saying that, oh, only measure impact, between 3 to 5 years, but it's not a defined time frame. I can't say to you that impact can be measured at 3 years. Generally, the principle is that it takes a longer time to see change at an impact level. Okay, so where do we get these kind of topologies from? Where does it come from? How did we decide on different kinds of types and approaches and methods? And I'll take you back to something which is a very, very useful kind of way of framing our understanding of where different types and approaches of evaluation come from. So I see the chats coming through thick and fast. I know I can't answer everybody, so my apologies in advance for that. Alkett and Christie is a very, very useful book, especially if you're new to evaluation, talks about evaluation roots. And what Alkett and Christie have come up with is something called the evaluation theory tree. For those of you who are interested in the new conversations around decolonizing and transforming evaluation, our good colleague, Professor Bagele Chilisa from the University of Botswana, has actually come up with an alternative together with her colleague of an African evaluation theory tree. So if you're interested in that conversation, you might want to go and check that one out. But this one is the one that's kind of, been in existence for the longest time, since 2004. So they use the metaphor of a tree to tell us where did the purpose of evaluation come from and how have we clustered these evaluations. So it's very visual and concretely tells us that there are roots to evaluation and there are branches and there are leaves. So it groups these according to the various theorists who have, defined evaluation types and approaches in a certain way. So some of these names you'll be quite familiar with. You'll see Michael Quinn-Patton is there, Eleanor Shalimsky, who has passed, is there. You'll find Lincoln Nguba is there. So some of these names are quite familiar to us in the evaluation field. The three roots of evaluation that Alkin and Christie have clustered are social accountability, social inquiry, and epistemology. So social accountability, for example, presents the motivation for evaluation. So accountability really is about the measurement for compliance. Although Alkin and Christie don't really see it as being something negative or something limiting, they see that accountability is a way for us to improve programs. Then the second root system is social inquiry. So this is about the methods. This leads to the methods branch. So you'll find that Rossi, Kronbach, Cook, and so forth, and that branch are the methods experts and those who've kind of clustered evaluation according to methodological types. And then thirdly, the foundational root is epistemology, which is the meaning of knowledge and how we view knowledge. And these concerns are around what is the legitimacy of the claim that you're making from your evaluation. So a little bit theoretical. If you wanted to have a look at that and you find that interesting, you might want to read up on it. The chapter on this evaluation theory tree is actually on ResearchGate, and it's freely available. You can download it. But this just gives you one interesting way to kind of test and see where does the evaluation types actually come from. Taking another course very generously, and I'm not expecting you to look at the detail of this. This is just a way to show you how different practitioners and how different theorists have clustered the choices that we make between evaluation approaches, theories, and types. So this colleague, Sarah Wacker, very generously put this together for us to say that there are all of these. There's a map of evaluation choices that we have, and she very kindly mapped it out in this way. It's also freely available. She actually placed it on her LinkedIn page. And she talks to another kind of talks to evaluation paradigms, meaning the ontological and epistemological stances, meaning how do we view knowledge? How do we value knowledge? And so these are the old-fashioned paradigms. For those of us who came from a research background, you'll remember positivist, post-positivist, constructivist, critical, pragmatist, realist. So there are paradigms that may underline our choice of evaluation type. The focus can also define how we choose a particular evaluation type. So if our focus is on human rights, social justice, and equity, we might be inclined to choose a participatory approach to evaluation or an empowerment evaluation. If our focus is on gender, we might be looking at equitable evaluations or gender equity lenses in evaluation, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the kind of map of approaches there, whether you choose a gender-focused, a realist, goal-free, theory-based, very often is rooted in how we think about knowledge and what our paradigm is and where we come from. So what I found in the evaluation sector very often is if somebody has come from a very kind of pure economist background and their paradigm has been, in economics, they are inclined to lean towards positivism. I mean, it's also a kind of probably a stereotype, but I wonder about you. Have you found that your paradigm influences how you think about evaluation? So if you are more inclined to qualitative designs and you find the meaning of people's storytelling really important, you might be more inclined to choose a constructivist paradigm, which means that you really believe that the world is constructed by people's perception of reality, that our world is constructed out of people's experiences and reality, and that there isn't a single defined reality, that it's all constructed. So this is just to show you that the map is really large. Certainly don't expect you to know all of this, to know just in principle that the way we choose evaluation types can be based on many things, including the way we view the world. And so there's 2 slides on that. Okay, let me pause quickly for another round of questions and comments. So let me go back. I don't know how far to go back, so apologies in advance. I'm going to go back as far as I think it's possible. So Ruba, you are saying at times it's difficult to carry out impact evaluation, especially a capital project during a government mandate. I wonder if you could speak us about that, Ruba. I'm not quite sure if I understand fully. I think I get what you're saying, but it would be great if you would be able to speak to us about that. So Ruba, to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm looking at evaluation from the perspective of a government officer, because I worked in the civil service for quite a long time. And in Mauritius, for example, their focus is more on monitoring. But then we look at the practical difficulties, for example, when it comes to evaluation, because the mandate of a government is 5 years. There is election every 5 years. So every government which comes into power, they have got a government program. And the focus it is the completion of the government program within the 5-year period. So hence impact evaluation to assess the impact, whether negative or positive of a project, it's a bit challenging. So that's why I wanted to put this on board.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. I think that is with policy evaluation, it's very often linked to a government's term of office. And very often you'll find that towards from the 3rd, 4th year, you start getting these, requests or requirements for impact evaluation. Because of course, as we very often hear, evaluation and monitoring is a technical exercise, is a political exercise with technical dimensions. And so, especially in a policy context, I think that very often the way we choose an evaluation and evaluation type is actually informed by the political context. Are we close to elections? Is there a need for evidence to demonstrate that this administration has really done its work? And I think that's a really, really important point for policy evaluation. That kind of longitudinal view is somewhat of a luxury sometimes. So even though you know that it might require many more years before you can see that impact, you very often are constrained and almost have to do an impact evaluation because that's what the context requires. So thank you very much for that comment. Any other comments? I'm being asked for wrap. Gosh, there's so much to talk about. I think we've got this one down. Methods versus methodologies. Methods, the way we collect, analyze data. Methodologies, the entire evaluation strategy. Let me not go into that. Let's go into the principles in evaluation design planning. And let's see if we can kind of get a grip on how do we then select the best approach or method. Actually, there is no single best evaluation approach or method. I think you would have guessed that by now. There is no such thing as the best approach or method. What we basically do say is that look at the principles of what your evaluation is trying to achieve and what questions it's trying to answer as a way of determining what approach and what methods you'll be using. And as Randika mentioned earlier, and also depends on where you are, of course, in the policy program or project cycle. So the nature of the intervention being evaluated. Is it a long-term program? Is it a pilot intervention? Is it at the beginning? Is it a policy choice that hasn't yet been made and there's information needed to take that policy choice? So that would be something to kind of locate the choice. Secondly, the types of questions the evaluation is addressing. Is the evaluation asking, are these the right set of interventions that we have decided upon in order to address this bigger societal problem? Then that is clearly about, the fidelity of the theory of change. And that would be about design, the design of the program. So a design evaluation would be appropriate. But if the question is about, have we achieved the goal of this intervention? Has impact been achieved? Then it tells you that it's more around the realm of outcome and impact. So the type of question that the evaluation addresses is very important. Clearly, the opportunities, constraints under which the evaluation is conducted is very important. And as Ruba just told us now, it's really difficult, for example, to do an impact evaluation, a true impact evaluation design when you are constrained by the environment and the dictates of the environment. So absolutely your choice is limited or at least bounded by these opportunities and constraints. So if, for example, you only have 6 months or you have 3 months for an evaluation, you might have to say, okay, we'll do a rapid evaluation because we have budget constraints and we have time constraints. And of course, the context, the cultural, social, political, environmental context will also determine the kind of evaluation, the type, the approach, and the methods. And once again, from the very, very excellent book and guide by Vassan, Lemire, and Pafani, which was published in 2020, also open source, freely available, that can also be retrieved off the internet. If you are interested, then the organizers can just ask me. I can also just send it to the organizers to circulate around to everybody. Now, applying these principles, and I was thinking that we might have some time, but clearly I was very ambitious to think that we would have 10 minutes to do this exercise. But maybe this is something that you can quickly think about in 2 or 3 minutes. I think I literally have about 5 minutes left, if I'm correct, according to the organizers. So maybe just take 2 or 3 minutes to think about the principles of this particular evaluation and then what the most suitable type, approach, and methods would be. So reading from the left are the principles in the bold text, and then the next column is the evaluation details. So this evaluation is a pilot coding program for learners in secondary schools, and we are now midway through a 5-year implementation program. So that's the nature of the intervention. It's a pilot program. We are at the midway through implementation. Second principle is, what are the evaluation questions to be answered? The questions we'd like answered are, what are the benefits of the program to learners? Is the program meeting its targets? Is the program achieving its goals? And then lastly, these are the constraints, and this is the context that we have in terms of time, budget, and preferences. It must be completed in 6 months. We have a very small budget. There are poorly resourced schools that are going through this program, and there are constrained socioeconomic conditions. So if you just take a minute, I'm pretty sure a minute or 2 should be sufficient. Think about, from what we've just spoken through now, what would the most suitable type and approach to this evaluation be, and what might the most suitable methods be? I'll just give you a moment to think about that. And as soon as you have any kind of suggestions, please do put them in the chat box. If you've got a type, approach, methods, anything you'd like to share. Got some comments coming in. It would be good to conduct a baseline evaluation in order to understand the level of relevant knowledge and skills of targeted students. Wow, that's an innovative one. I didn't actually even think about that. So thank you, Kuzdia Keri. Apologies if I'm pronouncing your name very badly. And then we've got a Dene Shimeg. saying appreciative inquiry approach, developmental evaluation approach, focus group as a method, informant interviews and surveys as methods. So appreciative inquiry, very good. And developmental evaluation, I love that. So that would mean that you can actually influence the remainder of the implementation of that program by feeding the evidence back to the implementers. That's lovely. And then somebody saying outcome evaluation, as we cannot go for impact evaluation midway. Yes, very often funders want to know the propensity of reaching those outcomes. So even though it's not the best thing to do an outcome evaluation midway, what we often say to the fund is that, okay, we will try to look at what the potential would be of achieving those outcomes as you go towards the end. But absolutely correct, you can't do the impact evaluation midways. Thank you. No worries, Arabic names are difficult to pronounce. Thank you so much. Formative approach, theory-based, yes, that would be correct. Outcome evaluation, the approach. As I said, outcome evaluation probably possible to some degree. Some outcomes should be, observable midway through, and a participatory approach. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we probably have reached the end. I would have asked you a question, which route or branch would you locate the evaluation, but I think we're way too late for that. This is what I came up with. So my answers to this would be formative evaluation, theory-based implementation and outcome evaluation. And we would have to be rapid because we have a very small budget and only 6 months. We would do key informant interviews, document review, and thematic analysis. So that's what I would put in my concept note and in my inception report to this particular commissioner of the evaluation of how we would do this evaluation. So takeaways today. Hopefully you should be able to distinguish between the concepts evaluation type, approach, methods, and methodologies. You should be able to know that there are a myriad approaches, types, and methods, and understand how they are typically defined. And lastly, understand and know how you would use the principles underpinning the selection of evaluation types, approaches, and methods. So hopefully those are indeed your takeaways today. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your attention. Like I say, I do talk a lot. I probably could have spoken less, but thank you so much for indulging me. I hope that you have been able to take something away from this. Thank you so much, Maha. Chairperson, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Candice. This was no less than an Eval 101 course, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned so much. I mean, these are the things that we, as professionals, we're using these methodologies, types, but, to brush up all these concepts is just great because at times we don't realize, or it's just, at the back of our head. So you really brought it forward and did a great job. Thank you so much. And now this brings us to the end of day 2. I am so thankful to all the speakers, to all the resource persons, and to all the participants who have been so great, who have interacted with us and the speakers so much. And this was thoroughly great experience. Tomorrow is day 2. It's a big day because not only we have like the last 2 days, great lineup of speakers and resource persons, but it's going to be a way bigger audience. So we hope to see you tomorrow, and thank you so much.
Thanks, ma'am. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.